This is Imelda, Aiden said. She used to do home care. She helps around the house now. The man shook my hand with the pleasant distance people use when speaking to household staff. He wore a jacket that cost more than my first car and smiled without quite meeting my eyes. You must be proud of Aiden tonight, he said. Quite an achievement. I looked at my son. Aiden did not correct him. 20 minutes earlier, I had been Aiden Bork's 67-year-old mother. I had raised him and his sister Deirdre in a 3-bedroom house in Hamilton after their father died. I had worked mornings as a personal support worker, bathing and dressing elderly strangers in their homes while my children slept. I had built a home care company from a borrowed client list and a second-hand scheduling binder, and I had eventually sold that company for more money than Aiden had ever thought to ask about. Now, at a gala honoring him as one of the region's most promising property developers, I had become the help. I handed him the folder of presentation notes I had been carrying and said, I have been looking after things around Aiden's life for a very long time. His wife, Helena, looked at the floor. Aiden laughed just loudly enough and guided the investor toward the reception bar. He didn't look back. He did not know that the evening's final presentation had been kept from him. He did not know why the foundation's executive director had called me 3 times in the 2 weeks before the gala. And he certainly did not know that before the dessert course was cleared, the same room would hear my full name, my real history, and the truth about the building on Ferris Street that he had been promising investors as though it already belonged to him. My name is Imelda Bork. I grew up in a narrow house in Hamilton's East End, near the steel plant that employed most of the fathers on our street, including mine. My mother worked the dinner shift at a family restaurant for 16 years and never once complained about it in my presence. We were not poor in a way that made the news, just ordinary poor, the kind that means second-hand winter coats and careful arithmetic at the grocery checkout. At 22, I married Vincent, who had grown up 3 streets away and repaired small appliances out of a workshop in his parents' garage. At 25, I had my son Aiden. At 28, I had my daughter Deirdre. At 31, Vincent had a heart attack while changing brake pads on a neighbor's car. He was dead before the ambulance arrived. He left me a modest life insurance policy, an 8-year-old minivan with a cracked dashboard, and 2 children who asked different versions of the same question for the next 2 years. I found work as a personal support worker. For 7 years, I drove to clients' homes before the sun was fully up, helped elderly men and women wash and dress and eat, and drove home before the children left for school. My clients discussed their medications, their children, and their fears while I worked beside them. Most thanked me. A few didn't acknowledge that I had spoken. One woman left a $10 bill on the kitchen table every visit and called me dear as though that covered everything. I noticed that the agency that employed me had poor scheduling, slow payroll, and no plan for workers who arrived to find a client had been hospitalized overnight without warning. I didn't complain. I started a binder. The home care company began because one of my clients, a retired school principal I will call Mrs. Pettigrew, asked whether I could arrange care for her sister as well, since the agency couldn't accommodate the new address. I said yes. I called another PSW I trusted, arranged a schedule, invoiced Mrs. Pettigrew directly, and set aside the money in a separate account. That was Bork Home Care, 1 binder, 2 clients, and a belief that workers who were treated fairly wouldn't call in sick at dawn. Within 3 years, I had 12 workers and 28 regular clients across the lower city. Within 8 years, Bork Home Care held contracts with the regional HIN and serviced clients in 4 municipalities. I hired a coordinator, then an office manager, then a training director. I paid workers above the provincial minimum and offered reliable scheduling, which was rarer in the industry than it should have been. Workers stayed. Clients kept us. Aiden grew up beside that company. He did homework on the floor of our first office on Friday afternoons. He attended our staff Christmas party, which was pizza in the boardroom because I hadn't yet made enough money for a restaurant. He knew the coordinators by name and once, at 15, spent an afternoon helping us move filing cabinets when we outgrew the space. At 16, he told a guidance counselor that his mother ran a company that helped seniors live at home. At 19, he wrote in a university application essay that watching me build something from nothing had taught him what real work looked like. Somewhere between his convocation and his 38th birthday. That version of events became inconvenient. Aiden built his first project, a 12-unit condo conversion in a row of factory-era buildings in Hamilton's North End, at 34. He was smart, persuasive, and gifted at seeing the livable space inside a neglected structure. The project worked. He sold the units, repaid his investors, and gained a reputation as someone who could look at a tired building and find what it still had to offer. What the public profile didn't mention was that his first significant investor had been me. When the bank wouldn't extend sufficient financing for his initial project, I lent him $300,000. The loan was documented, signed by both of us, and carried a modest interest rate. He repaid it over 5 years. When his second project ran short of contingency funds, I invested $150,000 in exchange for a small equity stake. That project sold out, and we both made money. I never gave him a business. I gave him capital with honest terms, and he worked hard enough to build something real from it. That should have been a story he could tell without embarrassment. Instead, he became self-made. At first, I treated the phrase as shorthand. Then a business magazine profile described him as the son of a home care worker, technically true and entirely misleading. The article said he had entered the industry with personal savings and a single investor contact from his MBA program. No mention of me. No mention of the $300,000 that had kept his first project alive past February. I asked him about it over dinner. He smiled. Journalists compress things, Mom. They're not writing a financial history. They described you as self-made. I built the company. With capital I provided. Which I repaid. After the opportunity existed because of it. He kissed my cheek and changed the subject. I let him. That was my first mistake. I believed that correcting him would look like I was chasing credit, and a mother shouldn't compete with her son. Each time Helena reshaped the story in a profile or a speaking bio, I told myself I was being gracious. I was not being gracious. I was making the false version easier to repeat. Helena had married Aiden 11 years before the gala. She came from a family of architects, worked in strategic communications, and understood instinctively how a career was built not just from completed projects, but from the story told about them. When we first met, she asked about Bork Home Care with what seemed like genuine interest. Over time, she became the person who edited Vincent out of Aiden's public biography, who referred to my loan as early private backing, and who described my building on Ferris Street, the one I had purchased for our main office 20 years earlier, as a derelict industrial property that Aiden had identified for redevelopment. People want a clear arc, she told me once, at a dinner where I had gently pointed out that a speaking bio had omitted the loan entirely. Too many contributors and the story loses focus. Then tell a focused truth. She smiled as if I had said something charmingly naive. The moment I understood how far the revision had traveled was at a dinner Helena hosted for 2 developers from Toronto and a city planner I recognized from the Neighborhood Advisory Committee. When they learned I had founded Bork Home Care, one of the developers asked how large the company had become at sale. I began to answer. Helena touched my arm. Imelda has an incredible memory for the early years, she said. Aiden's childhood really grounded him. That's where his sense of community comes from. The conversation pivoted back to him. Later, loading the dishwasher, I asked why she had interrupted. They were here for the Ferris Street proposal, she said. Long digressions can pull energy from the room. I wanted to say that the developer had asked a direct question about me. Instead, I went home. The pattern continued because each instance seemed too small to justify a rupture. At Aiden's 42nd birthday, Helena assembled a timeline display. Photographs, headlines, milestones. One photograph showed him at 11, sitting cross-legged on the floor of our first office with a textbook open across his knees. The caption read, "Aiden learns the value of hard work while his mother keeps the business going." By that point, I had 14 full-time staff, 2 office locations, and a payroll I ran myself every second Thursday. Deirdre found me standing in front of the display. "She made you sound like a receptionist," she said. "Leave it tonight." Why? Because fixing it now becomes the story of his birthday. Deirdre looked through the glass doors at Aiden under the string lights, laughing with his Toronto contacts. Maybe it should. The gala was organized by the Regional Community Foundation. Aiden was receiving its Emerging Builder Award for adaptive reuse projects that had brought commercial and residential activity into neglected city blocks. The award was not undeserved. He had completed real work. He had hired local tradespeople, consulted neighborhood associations, and delivered projects that hadn't priced out every existing tenant overnight. My quarrel was never with his accomplishments. My quarrel was with his belief that those accomplishments became more impressive when everyone who had helped him was removed from the frame. 6 weeks before the gala, I received a call from Dr. Felicity Osiwusu, the foundation's executive director. She asked me careful questions about Bork Home Care, its growth, the certification program I had funded for internationally educated care workers, and the investments I had made in neighborhood organizations over the past decade. I assumed she was gathering background on Aiden. Then she asked whether I could keep a confidence. The foundation planned to present me with its Legacy Award at the close of the evening. The award recognized individuals whose contributions to the community had accumulated over decades without significant public recognition. I nearly declined. I didn't like events built around myself. I preferred writing checks, reviewing proposals, and leaving before the photographs. Dr. Osi Wusu said that 8 former Bork home care employees had submitted nominations. The foundation had interviewed workers who had started as PSWs and were now agency owners, long-term care managers, and training coordinators. This isn't only about your financial support, she said. It's about the kind of employer you chose to be when you didn't have to be. That changed my answer. I agreed on one condition. The award would remain confidential from Aiden and Helena until it was announced. She kept her word. A week before the gala, Aiden called to ask a favor. The dry cleaner had damaged a button on his suit jacket, and their regular cleaning help was away on medical leave. Could I come by early, bring a needle and thread, and help Helena with a few things before they left? I said yes. I had planned to dress at home and meet them at the venue. Instead, at 4 in the afternoon, I drove to their house in a plain black dress I wore to board meetings. Clean, comfortable, and unremarkable, with a sewing kit in my bag. I spent the next hour and a half reattaching the button, blotting a red wine stain from the hallway runner, locating Aiden's acceptance notes, and calling the venue to confirm parking. At 5:30, I said I needed to leave and change. The car is coming in 8 minutes, Aiden said. I'll meet you there. Mom, you can't get a cab to the Sheraton in 8 minutes on a Friday night. Helena came down the stairs. She looked composed and lovely in a navy dress that had taken me 40 minutes to steam. That black dress is fine, she said. You'll be seated near the back anyway. I have a table assignment. She paused. You have a separate invitation? Yes. Aiden adjusted his cuffs. It's probably a general sponsor row. Come with us, we can't hold the car. I thought of Dr. Osi Wusu's request for discretion. I said nothing about it. I went with them. On the drive over, Helena asked whether I could carry Aiden's garment bag and her small emergency case. Her hands were full with her evening bag and a folder of notes. I agreed. That was how I walked into the Sheraton Grand Ballroom carrying other people's things. A woman in a plain black dress who looked, to anyone who didn't look closely, exactly like what I had once been. Someone who showed up early to manage the details. The entrance hall was full. Developers, counselors, architects, foundation donors. Photographers gathered near the sponsor wall. Aiden stopped every 6 steps to shake hands. Helena moved beside him, precise and composed. A man broke from a small group and extended his hand to Aiden. I recognized him from local business reporting. He ran a private equity firm that had been in discussions about the Ferris Street development. Aiden, he said warmly. And this must be your mother. You've mentioned her background in home care. He gave my son an easy opening. All Aiden had to do was say yes. He looked at me, at the garment bag, at the people nearby. This is Imelda, he said. She used to do home care. She helps around the house now. The investor shook my hand with the pleasant distance people use for household staff. Aiden did not correct him. You must be proud of Aiden tonight, the man said. Quite an achievement. I looked at my son. I have been looking after things around Aiden's life for a very long time. Deirdre appeared at my elbow. She had arrived separately, straight from work, still in her office clothes. Dad, she began. Aiden pulled her into a hug before she could finish. He said her name, her job title, her relationship to him. He introduced her correctly and completely. Then he steered the investor toward the reception bar. Deirdre turned to me. Did he just tell that man you work at his house? Helena lowered her voice. It was awkward phrasing. Aiden is nervous. He said she helps around the house while she was holding your things. Please don't do this tonight. I handed Helena the garment bag. You can carry this now. She took it. Several people nearby noticed the exchange. At the registration desk, a volunteer found my name and reached immediately for her earpiece. Dr. Osi Wusu came from the ballroom within 2 minutes, both hands extended. Mrs. Bork, we've been watching for you. Aiden, still nearby, turned. Your table is in row B, front section, the director said. We also have a room if you'd prefer to wait before the final presentation. Helena's voice was careful. Final presentation? I looked at the director. I'd rather stay with my family until then. She nodded and returned to the ballroom. Aiden watched her go. What presentation? He said quietly. We'll find out. Helena opened the printed program. My name did not appear. The Legacy Award was listed only as a surprise close to the evening. She looked at me. Imelda, what have you arranged? Nothing. The director knew you by sight. People occasionally know me. Deirdre made a sound that was almost a laugh. Aiden did not. My table was at the front, beside former foundation trustees and a retired city councilor I had known for 20 years. Aiden and Helena sat one table back, with the other award recipients. Deirdre moved her place card to sit beside me. Helena noticed. Your seat is at our table. This is where I want to be, Deirdre said. The investor who had mistaken me for household staff was seated across the aisle. When he saw me at the front table, his expression shifted. I did not rush to clarify anything for him. Dinner proceeded. Speakers discussed the city's changing neighborhoods, the importance of affordable housing, the value of preserving what was worth keeping in older buildings. Several of Aiden's completed projects appeared on screen. I applauded each of them. When his award was called, I stood with the room. He walked to the lectern with the ease of someone who had rehearsed but wanted to appear unrehearsed. He thanked his team, his investors, and Helena. He thanked Deirdre for her work in youth housing advocacy. Then he described his childhood. I grew up watching my mother work in home care, he said. Early mornings, other people's houses. Years of that. She taught me that no work is beneath you, but she also showed me what it meant to want something lasting, something you could point to. The room turned toward me. He smiled as though he had honored me. He did not say I had later built a company. He did not say I had financed his first project. He left the image sitting where he had placed it. A woman in other people's homes, mornings, years of that, the foundation of his ambition and nothing more. I applauded anyway. After he returned to his seat, the investor leaned toward him. That woman at the front, is that your mother? Yes, Aiden said. I misspoke earlier. You said she works at your house. Helena said smoothly. Imelda has always been very involved with the family. Aiden meant she's part of everything we do. The explanation made the original worse. The investor nodded without agreeing. I had already turned toward the stage. 2 more presentations followed. Coffee was poured, then Dr. Osiwusu returned to the lectern. Our final honor this evening has no name printed in your programs, she said. The Legacy Award recognizes someone whose contribution to this city accumulated quietly. Over decades, before most people in this room thought to look. The room stilled. Deirdre reached for my hand. Tonight's recipient entered the workforce as a personal support worker. She built a home care company that, at the time of its sale, employed more than 320 people across 4 municipalities. She funded certification programs for internationally educated care workers, supported neighborhood organizations through 2 decades of this city's most difficult transitions, and invested privately in spaces whose value she recognized before anyone else put a number on them. Aiden's shoulders went rigid. Several projects celebrated here tonight received early support from her, though she rarely asked to be acknowledged. Dr. Osiwusu looked directly at me. Please welcome Imelda Bork. For a moment the room was completely still. Then Deirdre stood. The retired counselor beside me stood. The former trustees rose. The applause moved across the ballroom until the whole room was on its feet. I looked at Aiden. He had gone pale. The investor beside him was no longer confused. He was doing arithmetic. I walked to the stage in my plain black dress. Dr. Osiwusu placed a small bronze medallion in my hands. Behind us, the screen showed a photograph of the Ferris Street building in 1998. A brick storefront with a hand-lettered sign, Bork Home Care, 2 women standing in the doorway in blue polo shirts. Then the slide changed to a current photograph of the same building. Mrs. Bork is also the current registered owner of the Ferris Street property, the director said, which has recently been proposed as the site of a significant new mixed-use development in this city. A murmur moved through the room. Aiden turned to Helena. She had gone very still. I had not asked the foundation to include the ownership detail. It was public record, part of the property's history with the company. The truth had arrived in the room without any assistance from me. I had prepared 4 short paragraphs. I folded them in my hand and looked at the audience instead. I spent years working in rooms where people forgot I was there, I said. The work was honest. Being forgotten was the part that wore you down. I thanked my former employees by name. Most of them, the ones I still carried clearly. I thanked Vincent. I thanked Deirdre for understanding, from the time she was small, that showing up for people who need it is not a lesser life. Then I looked at Aiden. I could have repeated exactly what had happened in the entrance hall 2 hours earlier. I could have said it word for word and let the room draw its own conclusions. I didn't. My son has built work I am genuinely proud of, I said. He had help as all of us do. I hope everyone in this room remembers that acknowledging the people who helped you doesn't diminish what you built. It makes it honest. Some people glanced toward Aiden's table. I returned to my seat. The investor approached before I had touched my dessert. Mrs. Bork, I owe you an apology for earlier. I misunderstood the introduction. You understood what you were told. He glanced toward Aiden. I also understood that the Ferris Street transfer was imminent, that it was a settled arrangement. I chose my words with care. The property is registered to my holding company. We have had discussions about a possible development arrangement. No sale or transfer has been completed. His expression shifted in the way. That means several things are being reassessed at once. Our team was shown a project summary that described site control as secured, pending family confirmation. There is no pending confirmation. He thanked me quietly and returned to his table. Aiden had been watching all of it. After dinner, he asked me to come to a private room off the lobby. Helena followed. Deirdre followed them both. Aiden closed the door. Why did you tell him there's no transfer? Because there isn't one. We've been discussing this project for 14 months. Discussing is not the same as agreeing. Helena stepped forward. The investors needed a clear picture. We described the transfer as forthcoming because you had never said no. I had also never said yes. Aiden's voice rose. You knew this project depended on Ferris Street. You knew we were in active conversations. Then you should not have described it as secured before it was. He walked to the window and back. Do you understand what tonight may have cost me? Do you understand what that introduction cost you? Deirdre asked. He turned on her. This isn't about one sentence at a party. That's exactly the problem, she said. Helena looked at me with an expression she had refined over 11 years of family events. You arranged that award to embarrass him. The foundation arranged it. I kept it confidential so the evening would belong to his recognition until the end. Ask Dr. Osiwusu. That's a simple phone call. Aiden pressed both hands against the back of a chair. We can still recover this. Tell him the transfer is moving forward. Sign a letter of intent tonight. Helena opened her evening bag and produced a folded document. The speed of it told me they had prepared this before the first course was served. The letter committed my holding company to sell the Ferris Street property to Aiden's development group for $1.4 million, with payment deferred until construction financing closed. An independent assessment I had commissioned 6 months earlier had valued the property at just over $3 million. The letter also granted his company immediate permission to use the address in investor materials. I read it twice. Who determined this price? Aiden said the building required significant environmental remediation. Then where is the independent remediation assessment? He said it was being finalized. Where is proof of your financing commitment? Helena exhaled sharply. This isn't one of your care contracts, Imelda. No, it's a $3 million property, which means it deserves more scrutiny, not less. I handed the letter back. I won't sign this. Aiden's expression hardened into something I hadn't seen in him before. Then why did you come tonight? The question took me a moment. You invited me, Aiden. You came in that dress. You let everyone see you carrying our things. You accepted a secret award and corrected the property story in front of my investor. Don't pretend that was accidental. I looked at my son. I came in this dress because I spent 90 minutes pressing Helena's before you left the house. I was carrying her things because she asked me to, and you saw me doing it and decided it was easier to explain me as the help. The hardness in his face broke, just briefly. Shame was underneath it, then Helena spoke. Aiden was protecting the evening. From his mother, Deirdre said. No one answered her. I told them all future conversations about Ferris Street would go through my property manager and my lawyer. They were to stop describing the transfer as secured. They were not to use my name, my company's history, or any expectation of inheritance as materials shown to investors. Aiden laughed once, without warmth. Inheritance. So that's what this is actually about. It is now. The room went quiet. I had reviewed my estate 6 months before the gala. Under the existing plan, Aiden was to receive the majority of my holding company, including Ferris Street. He knew the general structure. He did not know the specific figures. You are building a $40 million project on a property you expect to inherit from a woman who is still alive and well, I said. Tonight, you introduced that woman to a business partner as someone who used to clean houses. That is not what I. You can have the exact words back any time you'd like. I remember them perfectly. Helena stepped between us. Don't threaten his inheritance in the middle of an emotional evening. I'm not changing anything tonight. Large decisions require distance and a clear head, but I will review everything on Monday. Aiden stared at me, because of one moment. Because the moment revealed a belief you've held for years. The documents will show me what you built on top of that belief. Deirdre drove me home. In the car, she gripped the steering wheel with both hands and told me what she had known for several weeks. Aiden had been telling investors the Ferris Street transfer was a certainty. Not approaching. Done. He had told some people it would be finalized after the gala, after the applause and the family photographs made refusal look disloyal. I watched the city move past the window, the old neighborhoods, the new condos rising between the factories, the streets I had driven before sunrise for 7 years. Is he going to lose everything? Deirdre asked. I don't know. Are you going to take the building away? It was never his. I paused. Refusing to give someone something is not the same as taking it from them. That distinction matters. On Saturday morning, I gathered the facts. I asked my property manager for every inquiry made about Ferris Street in the past 18 months. I asked my accountant for a current valuation and my lawyer, Adrian Chung, for the existing estate documents. By afternoon, the picture was complete. Aiden's company had filed a project summary with a funding consortium that described Ferris Street as family-controlled, transfer imminent. A separate investor deck listed $1.4 million as the acquisition cost and labeled the difference from the assessed value as a family equity contribution. Nearly $1.6 million of my money, committed to his project without my knowledge or signature. I called him. Did you approve that investor deck? Silence then. Yes. The one that shows a family equity contribution I never made. That gap represents the below-market pricing you would have agreed to, in exchange for community benefit commitments in the development. A contribution I never made is not a contribution. Remove it. He said removing it would require restructuring the financing. Then, restructure it. He said the project would bring construction jobs, hotel and retail employment, and new life to a block that had been declining for a decade. He said Ferris Street was sitting underused. He said, carefully, that Vincent had always believed in building things that lasted. Using his father's name was his last mistake in that conversation. Your father believed in honesty first, I said. Remove my property from every document you don't have my written authorization to include. This conversation is done. I ended the call. On Monday, Adrian and I confirmed what I already knew. The Ferris Street building was owned entirely by my holding company. No agreement had been executed, and Aiden's use of the property in investor materials was a material misrepresentation. We sent a formal notice to Aiden's company and to the known investors. It stated that the Ferris Street property remained solely under my company's control, that no sale or contribution had been approved, and that future use of the address in financial materials required written permission from my office. 4 paragraphs. It was enough. Then we opened the estate documents. Under the existing plan, Aiden was to receive 60% of my holding company, including direct control of Ferris Street and several other properties. That plan had been written when he still spoke about my work with something resembling accuracy. I did not remove him. I restructured what he could control. The holding company would pass into an independently managed trust. Aiden would receive a reliable annual income, enough for a comfortable life, not enough to service a $40 million development on collateral he hadn't earned. He could not force a sale of Ferris Street, pledge it, or lease it without trustee approval. Deirdre's share increased, protected for her own housing and the community work she had spent 15 years doing. The Training Foundation and former employee programs received the largest long-term endowments. Adrian asked whether I was acting from anger. Partly, I said. Come back to me in a week. She did. During that week, I reread every page and calculated whether the income trust would sustain Aiden adequately even if his own business failed entirely. Then, I signed. I did not restructure a $14 million estate because a ballroom had applauded me. I restructured it because my son had used private estate information, an unexecuted property transfer, and a decades-long false biography to build a financial structure on a foundation that was not his to stand on. The introduction in the entrance hall did not create the problem. It made the problem impossible to keep ignoring. The investor paused the project after receiving our notice. His team asked Aiden for revised costs, verified site control, and a documented record of financial contributions to each completed project. These were ordinary questions. Aiden struggled with them because his previous materials had been designed to avoid them. He called me twice asking whether I would invest the difference. I declined both times. "You helped with the first projects," he said. "Those plans had real numbers and real terms. This one will change the north end of the city. Then it should survive honest numbers." 30 days after our notice, Aiden submitted a revised proposal. It was better. The site price reflected the independent assessment. Environmental remediation costs were properly allocated. A portion of the ground floor retail would be offered at below market rates to local businesses already operating in the neighborhood. The investor group reduced Aiden's ownership share in exchange for the recalibrated structure. He didn't like the outcome. He accepted it. He told me later that accepting it was the first decision he had made entirely on what the project could actually bear, rather than on what he needed it to appear to be. I offered him 2 options: a purchase at fair adjusted value, payable at closing, or a long-term lease from my holding company that would allow the development to proceed while my company retained ownership of the land. The investor group preferred the lease. Aiden, after a week of considering it, agreed. Ferris Street opened 22 months after the gala. The original brick walls were preserved in the lobby. One section held framed photographs of Bork Home Care staff from 1998 to 2019, organized by year. Every person was named in full beneath their photograph. Aiden asked my permission before using them. At the opening, a reporter asked him how the development had come together. He stood beside me. "My mother owns the building," he said. "She also financed my first project more than 10 years ago. I wanted this site before I had done enough to deserve a real seat at the table. This hotel exists because she required us to bring honest numbers before she would consider it." He did not look smaller for saying it. He looked, for the first time in years, like the person he had told his guidance counselor he wanted to become. My relationship with Helena did not fully recover. She sent a written apology 4 months after the gala that addressed the stress of the evening and the difficulty of the property conversations. It did not address the entrance hall. I thanked her for writing and said I hoped we could move forward. We were courteous at family events. That was the most the situation permitted. Deirdre and I still meet most Sunday mornings at the place near her office with the good scones and drafty windows. She has never asked me to be different from who I am, and I have never asked her to be less honest than she is. For 2 people who spent years in the same small house learning to need very little, that is not nothing. I bought myself a good winter coat, deep green wool, the warmest thing I had owned in years. I spent 2 weeks in Nova Scotia with a former Bork Home Care coordinator, walking the coastline and eating too much chowder. I renovated my kitchen so the window above the sink finally opens properly. Small things, each of them chosen without apology. I also found someone to help with the house, twice a month. The woman who comes is named Doris. I learned her name on the first day and use it every time. I leave payment on the counter without pretending it makes her invisible. Once she noticed the bronze pause medallion on the shelf in my office and asked what it was for. "For spending a long time doing work that most people didn't bother to see," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "I know something about that." "I imagine you do," I said. At the Ferris Street opening, the investor from the gala found me near the staff photographs. He looked at my plain black dress, the same one, and then at the framed images behind me, and then back at me. "Mrs. Bork," he said carefully, "I want you to know I understand now what I didn't understand that evening." "Most things become clearer with time and better information," I said. He smiled. "I'll remember that." "So will I." The real victory was not the moment Dr. Osi Wusu said my name into a microphone. It was not the applause, or the restructured estate, or even Aiden standing beside me at the opening and telling the truth to a room full of people. The real victory was quieter than all of that. It was the moment I stopped trimming myself down to a size my son found easier to explain.